And he opens the door and he says, "You." I hadn't seen him in 5 years. "You." And I said, "You." And he turned to everybody and he goes, "This guy, you stood up for me. I said, "I brought you in 4 times. I wanted to get you the part." And he said, "Well, you stood up for me. You have this job." And I was not in the door.
Yeah.
And
Again, Dennis, that's we plant seeds, and when they grow is completely not up to us.
yeah.
Welcome to Right for the Role podcast. I'm your host, John Frank Levey. Thanks for joining me as I sit down with my friends and colleagues to explore their journeys to discover the roles they're right for, professionally and personally. As you listen, it's my greatest hope that you'll find inspiration and motivation to embrace the roles in your life you were always meant to play. And now I'd like to introduce my guest, Dennis Dugan, whom I've known since his early days as an actor. Dennis started his career with guest star roles in some of the greatest television shows of all time, iconic series like MASH, Hill Street Blues, The Mod Squad, The Waltons, Moonlighting, and others. That would be an entire career for some people, but for Dennis, it was just the beginning. In fact, Dennis is best known for comedies. Over the last nearly 20 years, he's been Adam Sandler's go-to director for films including Happy Gilmore, Big Daddy, The Benchwarmers, I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, You Don't Mess with Zohan, Grown Ups 1 and 2, Just Go With It, and Jack and Jill. Dennis's movies have grossed nearly $2 billion worldwide, which is funny since the industry often discounts comedies. I'm excited to discuss all of that and more with Dennis today on Right for the Role. First, let me tell you about how we first met. In the early 1980s, I was a director's fellow at the Mark Taper Forum here in Los Angeles, and I got an opportunity to direct a play by myself in the second space called Taper 2. And it wasn't the number 2, it was TOO for some weird publicity reason. And the play was called Estonia, You Fall. I think Dennis was the one who called it Estonia, You Fool. And I was in my very first casting session, and I was shitting bricks, nervous, wondering if I would know who was right for the role now that it was entirely up to me. And Dennis came in, and he read for the role of York, Private York, who I always saw as a scrappy little kind of guy who maybe stole a car when he was in high school, and the judge said, "You're going to jail, kid, or you're going to Vietnam. What do you want to choose?" And this scrappy guy chose Nam. What do you remember about that day, Dennis?
I remember the thing I remember most was that I had made my choices and came in, and you were not, you didn't boss me around. You let me, you let me be free on stage, and you encouraged. I felt like I had somebody who wasn't judging, but who was like my pal in this audition, and I went like, "Oh, this is really good," and I immediately felt really, really comfortable to go.
You know, it's funny because, you said in some interview that I read while Trudy was prepping me to talk to you, that, one of the things you do most, uh, with so much purpose is to create an environment where everybody feels free, and that you sometimes do that by sort of playing the jester or the fool. I did that too in casting sessions
Yeah.
for many, many years, relaxing people in the waiting room. I'm happy to hear you say that. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you if you remember, and this is something that, as Trudy indicated, we can cut out if you are uncomfortable about talking about it. But I remember that you may have been involved in a little bit of an altercation just before the audition in your car. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A guy, we were coming down the whatever freeway there is toward the Taper, and the guy uh, cut me off, and then uh, he may have thought I was somebody else because he cut me off. He jammed on his brakes, and then I went around him, and then I got off to get at the taper, and he followed me, and then cut me off again, and so I got out, and we had a little punch up, and then I came in. And I think that may be where you got the scrappy part.
Exactly. Well, Dennis, I think my memory of it is that you came into the room electrified by the in the way that we sometimes are when there's a conflict which could escalate.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that he followed you. I was once on the freeway back in the day when people had beepers. And
Oh, yeah.
I had a beeper on the inside pocket of my sport coat, and somebody cut me off, and then he pulled a gun.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was driving a little Carmen Ghia, and I went up on the sidewalk through a red light and made a right turn and drove as far and as fast as I possibly could.
Absolutely. And those three pedestrians that you killed, they actually never found you, did they?
No, they didn't. I got away with murder.
Maybe we should cut this part out for your sake, not mine.
So you grew up in Illinois, in a suburban part
Yeah.
of
I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois.
Right.
At Wheaton High School, I was 3 years behind Bob Woodward.
Oh, wow.
And 2 years ahead of Belushi.
Wow. Outstanding. Where did you get the idea that you might want to have a creative life?
Well, my mom had always wanted to be an actress, and she was a woman of the 50s who was just a homemaker mom, but her dream had always been to be an actress. And so she ran the Wheaton Drama Club. And so when I was a kid, there were always people rehearsing plays in our house. And I just found that fascinating. I literally had no aspirations about being in Hollywood or being in New York or anything. I just liked the idea of these people being these actors. And so that got me going.
Yeah, it's interesting because my mom wasn't an artist, but although she did play both the piano and the cello, she had crazy, interesting friends, and they were in my living room when I was a kid. And I think it's where I started being fascinated with people, and the more eccentric and unusual the people were, the cooler I thought they were as I was watching them. You had some of that same kind of experience.
Well, I didn't really. I would say that, like, I don't know, in my blindness or whatever, I didn't find the people so interesting because they were just, Wheaton, Illinois people just acting out these parts. And I just found that interesting. So one of the first things I ever got into was Rumpelstiltskin at the Wheaton Drama Club. And I played Rumpel. And I just loved it. And I wanted to be an actor. That's what I wanted to do.
You also said in one of the interviews that I read that you've always wanted to make people laugh. And for it's unbelievable how many people you've made laugh along with your cohorts in that wonderful collaborative community that you led for so many years.
Right.
Where did I learned that I was funny when milk came out of my brother's nose at the breakfast table.
Yeah. That's good. It's always a winner. Always a winner. That and farting. You'll always get laughs if you spit up, and if you spit up milk and farted at the same time,
that's gold.
Career. Yeah, it's gold.
How did you learn that you were funny?
I never felt like a member of any society. I wasn't that good an athlete, so I couldn't be on any teams. And the only sort of skill I had to get people to pay attention to me was to act like an idiot. And so that went, okay, well, if I'm funny, people will like me.
Yeah. And they do. And they do. Estonio You Fall was really fun, and you're a big prankster, but I remember John Aston, who played the Tamsari role. I was so blind to things like he had a toupee, and I didn't know it. And
Right.
when we were doing tech, he came down the aisle, and he had loosened his toupee, and he pretended to sneeze, and his toupee flew off his head onto my. I landed on my chest, and I was horrified. It was.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite pranks? I remember a great story that you told about a bottle of champagne and some friend of yours.
Some of my, I've always done a lot of them. One of my all-time favorites was I was in a Disney movie called The Spaceman and King Arthur, and we had a guy. It was all, it was in the days of King Arthur. In fact, we shot the whole thing at the castle, which became Harry Potter's castle
Uh-huh.
in Northumberland, northern England. And one of the guys was a pompous little guy, and he had bought 6 rather expensive paintings from an artist, a sort of a well-known British artist, and he hung them. We had dressing rooms in the castle, so he hung them in his dressing room, and I would. Every once in a while, I'd go in when he wasn't there, and I'd rehang them and take one. And he finally said to me, got kind of pissed at me, and said, "Look, it's funny what you're doing, but please don't do it anymore because the paintings are actually expensive and valuable." And I said, "Okay, I'll stop." So he was gone again. He had a day off. And I took one of the paintings we had tons of rain. So there was a lot of times we were just rained out and an entire crew was just sitting there. So I took it to the prop shop, and I said, "Hey, guys, can you guys copy this painting?" So they did. And then the carpenters copied the frame. And so again, it was like days of old, nights were bold, and Jim Dale was in it. And so we set it up that I'm walking through the courtyard with guys rehearsing, Jim Dale, of course, rehearsing sword fighting. And the director goes, "Oh my God, Rodney, he's got your painting out here." And I'm walking through the crowd of sword fighters. And as soon as Rodney looks up, Jim Dale stabs it and slices the entire painting in half. The fake painting. And almost gave him a heart attack. But that was one of the most complex and wonderful jokes we ever pulled.
That's fantastic. Another thing you talked about that I read about is that you part of your journey has been a journey of developing self-respect, and that led to confidence for you as a director and as a leader.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that part of your journey?
Well, again, once I left high school, I went down to. This is kind of not an answer to your question, but it's sort of is the journey. And I was just having a conversation with a couple people. We're doing Happy Gilmore 2 now. I'm in New Jersey, and so in the tent, Sandler's there and Chris McDonald and people, and we were talking about just you plan something and then an event happens and it changes your journey. And I've had the luck of having disasters change my journey and make me what I am. So I left high school and I went to Trinity University in San Antonio because that was the feeder school into the Dallas Theater Center. And at the time, if an actor, all actors wanted to be either at the Dallas Theater Center or at the Guthrie and be a resident actor there. And that was my goal. And so 2 years into it, I was basically on the track to go there. And a buddy of mine and I published an off-campus newspaper. And this is like, in the mid 60s. And it was Texas, and there was no protesting in Texas. No hippies were going to do that. So they kicked us out of school. And so I went back to Wheaton, and my mom had gone to the Goodman Theater in Chicago. And so she got me in as a legacy entrant. So I did 3 years at the Goodman Theater, which I wouldn't have done.
Right.
And so instead of going to Dallas, I finished the Goodman and I went to New York to be an actor. And I spent 3 years there beating it out, trying to get work. And I finally got in a play, The House of Blue Leaves.
Oh, what a great play.
And yeah, I replaced, I think, John Glover. And I got my equity card and I go, I'm in. I'm now an actor. And 6 weeks later, some drug addicts broke into the theater, stole the safe, and burned the lobby. And so and I was just crushed. And they called me and they said, look, we're not reopening the play, but we're going to open in Los Angeles, where I had never been. And they said, if you want, we can't pay you to go there or fly there or house you or anything. But if you go to Los Angeles, you can play the part in Los Angeles. So I did. And I made a hit out of that and got an agent. And then so suddenly I now am an actor, and I go, I'm staying in Los Angeles because I have an agent and I can do it. And so my career took another crazy turn.
Yeah.
And I started working.
I like to think of those things, and I talk about it in the book, right, for the role, about happy accidents, where if you just can be open to letting life sort of take you by the scruff of the neck and lead you somewhere, and not being passive at all, but being, actively capitalizing on these happy accidents. It's really a secret thing that.
Yeah, but I had never thought that I would even be in Los Angeles or in a TV show or a movie or anything. I had in fact, the first job that I got, I forget what it was, but I was at a table and I was, I'm a theater actor, so I'm like I'm gesturing like this, and the camera operator comes up to me and he says, "Could you do me a favor?" He said, "What?" And he said, "Can you hold the bottle? Can you hold the bottle like more like this and not do that?" And I go, "Sure, great." So I do the scene, and then I went back after, and I said, "Why did you want me to do that?" And he said, "Well, look through here." And he went out and sat out there, and he said, "See, what happens is this is going in and out of the frame." And I had never known. I had always been in a proscenium where it didn't matter how big your gestures were, but there was now such a thing as a frame. And I went, "Oh, that's interesting." So I would just ask questions of people as I was working, because I actually started kind of working regularly almost right away. And so at one point I came back to New York, and I was in a poker game with Alan Rosenberg and David Gus and the manager.
Yes, I remember David well.
And I won $3,000, which was crazy for me to have that much money. And I went back to Los Angeles and I bought a Super 8 film camera and some editing equipment. And I wrote a little short film, like a 5-minute little film, and shot it and edited it. I had no idea about editing or anything. I painted a wall in the basement white so I could project it. And I did one film, and then I did another film. And then I was having lunch one day with Stephen Cannell, Cannell and Bochco were my two like guys who really got me started. And I'd done a bunch of shows for them. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm making this little film. And Cannell had 6 shows on the air, Hunter and all those shows. And he said, I didn't know you wanted to direct. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, come direct for me. So the next day, the producer of Hunter called me and he said, come in. So I came in and he said, what do you know about? I said, well, I know about acting and I know a little bit about the camera from asking people stuff. And I've shot 2 little films. And he goes, well, just start following directors. So I followed directors through prep and through editing and all that. And about 6 months later, I said, okay, I'm ready. And Stephen goes, okay, direct Hunter. So
Fantastic.
I did an episode of Hunter, and then he said, do another Hunter. And then he did it, Wise Guy, and a couple shows and stuff. And then I got a call. You'll like that. I know you don't know this story, but I got a call from my agent. I went in and I auditioned for a role that I so wanted. It was the best audition I ever gave. I just absolutely was free, ad-libbing, cool, funny, great, slaughtered. That afternoon, Ron Meyer, my CAA agent, calls me and says, the creator wants to talk to you and he wants to call you at home. I go, great. So guy gets on the phone, Glenn Caron, and he says, he said, we've seen everybody in New York, Chicago, LA, we've seen everybody. You gave by far the best audition. And I said, thank you. Boom. And he says, I'm not taking you to the network. And I go, what? He said, I wanted to call you personally, so you didn't get it from an agent or anything. I think the guy I wrote it for is out of New York. And if I take you to the network, you'll get the job. And he said, I just wanted you to know that you did the best, but he's the guy. And I said, well, thank you very much. And that was Bruce Willis in Moonlighting.
Oh my goodness gracious.
And by the way, he was 100% right. Because if as a casting person, I was like, I would get pilots a lot because I was the Midwestern, safe, John Ritter, Tim Matheson kind of guy. And Bruce was an edgy, great guy. And he was perfect for that part. Absolutely perfect. So now I've jumped back, but now jump forward. And I'm directing a little bit now. And I get a call and they said, we want you to marry Sybil in the show. And we want you to do the rest of this season and next season. So I signed up for that. And so my audition 4 years later got me that job. And so I went on, did a couple episodes. They went on, we were getting married on the show. And then the fans went, boo, we want her to end up with Bruce. We don't want her marrying this fucker. So they called me up to the office and they said, look, nothing to do with your acting, but the fans want Bruce and Sybil to end up together. So we're getting your wedding annulled, but would you come and direct next year? And I go, because we've heard that you started directing. And I go, yeah. And they said, Bruce and Sybil love you. And they're not fans of all the directors. And sometimes they're kind of tough on them, but they love you. So come and direct every other one. So I now spent that whole year directing Moonlighting. And at the time, it was like you were a TV director or a movie director or a TV actor or a movie actor. And, but because it was Moonlighting and it was like a crazy kind of show that wasn't really TV, I was able to jump into Problem Child and started my movie career.
Wow. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us. Would you tell me a little bit about the part that I remember most vividly, and that is that wonderful part on Hill Street. And Hill Street, Hill Street really changed the face of television, and that so that there was that ABC storylines, and there was all this
Right.
huge ensemble. And China Beach is a child of Hill Street, and so is ER, and so is The West Wing, and so much of my career it goes back to what was done by the Bochco team on Hill Street, and that character that you played on that, what was it, Captain America? No,
Captain Freedom.
Captain Freedom.
Yeah,
and you were following police activity on a police scanner and showing up at crime scenes.
Captain Freedom was an interesting thing, because Bochco, again, he and Cannell had cast me as Richie Brockelman,
right?
Which was like a well-received failure, and so I was, Bochco was a friend and Cannell was a friend. So Cannell had gotten me directing, and Bochco came to dinner one night, and at the end of dinner, he said, I know you're like not doing TV because you're doing more movies now as an actor, but he goes, I got a part for you. And he started describing this 4-show arc of this character, and who was a street crazy who thought he was a superhero. And he said, so, if you want to read it, I said, I don't need to read it. I'm doing it. So, I had an interesting thing there where, again, he was really crazy. So I went in, I knew that it was 4 episodes, and I knew that it was like 2, maybe 3 days per episode that I was going to be working. So I thought, it's 10 or 12 days. I can survive that. So I went in the first day, put on my costume, which was crazy. Had a cape and a leather helmet and some goggles and some stuff. And guy knocked on the door. The AD knocked on the door, and he said, yeah, we're ready for makeup. And I said, I don't do makeup. And he goes, well, I go, I don't do makeup. And I was all dressed in my costume in my trailer. And he goes, okay, whatever. And then he comes back and he goes, Dennis, we're ready. And I don't answer the door. And he goes, Dennis, we're ready. And he looks in and he goes, and I go, you looking for Captain Freedom? And he goes, yeah. And I go, I'm ready. So I go out, and I never talked to, I just trained the crew. I didn't tell him, but I made him learn it. I only talked to the director or to Bruce Weitz, I had most of my scenes with, as me, as an actor. Everybody else, if they didn't call me Captain Freedom, I didn't answer. and I thought, it made it good for me because people thought I was fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And I knew, if it had been a 6-month movie or whatever, I couldn't have done it. But and this one, I thought I can pull this off, and it helped me, and it helped everybody else unknowingly.
Yeah, because they all treated you like you were out of your mind.
Yeah. And a couple of them were kind of pissed at how crazy I was, but I didn't care. I'm going to pull this off.
Oh, that's fantastic.
One of the things I wanted to tell you about getting, because this actually comes into the acting zone, when I went in to pitch myself for Problem Child, I go to it was Casey Silver, the president of Universal. I go up to his office, and he had this huge coffee table in his office, and around it on 3 sides was couch. And it was a big, thick wooden coffee table. And so I walk in, and there's 3 producers and 5 executives and Casey. And I walk in and I start my pitch. I've never pitched myself for a movie before. So I walk in, I start my pitch, and it's going okay, but I see that they're not really engaged. So I step up onto the coffee table, which is like a stage because it's theater in the round a little bit. And they all like, and I go, okay, I know you guys are all looking at me and going, what the hell's he doing on the coffee table? And I said, I've never pitched myself for a movie before, and I've never certainly been in the president of Universal's office before. And so when I'm done with my pitch and I leave, whether I get it or not, you're all going to, when I leave the room, you're going to say, holy shit, how about that nut getting up on the coffee table and walking around? And I said, and then you're going to go back to your offices and you're going to say, we had a bunch of guys and one of them got on the coffee table and walked around. And I said, that's what we want for this movie. We want this kid to be so goofy and so crazy and so nuts that everybody the next day is talking about that behavior. And I said, so that's my pitch for the movie. Goodbye. And I got off the coffee table and I left. And 2 hours later, I get a call, not from my agent. I get a call. Casey Silver is calling. And I go, okay. And Casey gets on the phone. He goes, all right, you got up on my coffee table and you got the movie.
Fantastic. So you're celebrating doing it wrong, right? It's like if you try to do it the way everybody expects you to do it, it won't be different enough from your uniqueness is in your boldness and your willingness to just defy the rules and create something unique and special.
And I hadn't planned it.
No, I'm sure not.
I'm going to go in there and walk on his coffee table.
Yeah, good plan. Yeah, I mean, some of the years ago when I first met Dana Delaney before she got the lead role on China Beach, she was auditioning for a small part in a movie for television that James Garner and James Woods were starring in. Woods, not surprisingly, was playing the crazy brother, and and Garner was playing the womanizing mayor of a small town. And Dana was auditioning for a role as a date of Garner's, and in the scene, she fell off the couch laughing at a joke and crawled across the room up onto his lap and kissed him. Well, she did that in the audition with me, and that's not a good idea.
Right.
But it turned out to be a very good idea.
Yeah.
And then she said at the casting society years later, she said, find a heterosexual casting director, kiss him in the audition, wait 10 years, get the lead in a series. and it's a terrible idea. If there are young actors out there listening to us,
yes,
never kiss the casting director, never get up on the coffee table.
No.
But unless you can do it, spontaneously and without regret.
Yeah. Never involve any of the participants, the casting person, the producers, or anything. It just makes them uncomfortable.
Oh, completely.
Yeah. So don't. But when in that first episode of Hunter that I directed, a girl came in and was completely charming, completely funny, completely fun, and didn't get the part. But I took her photo, and that was the first one. I started a file of actors that I liked so I could go back to them. And literally, how many ever years later, when I got Problem Child, we hired John Ritter to be the dad. And I went through my file and I go, Amy Yazbek, I remember her. She was great. And I pulled her thing and I said, let's hire. And so we cast Amy Yazbek from that reading from 6 years before.
Yeah.
And not only were they husband and wife in the movie, they became husband and wife.
Yes, of course. Wow. I remember meeting Amy early on in her career as well. And I too had a file of people who didn't get the job, but who tickled my fancy in one way or another. And then you remember those people. And I think, it's important for young actors to know that every time you get an opportunity to audition, it's a win. And whether, obviously, it's better in some ways if you get the job, but it might be better if you don't get the job, because you might get a bigger, better, more important job off of that audition later. I hate having my picture taken. I always have. I'm so uncomfortable being the center of attention, I guess, that I always make funny faces. And there's a famous picture of me as a hippie with an orange traffic cone on my head. Imagine that. When it came time to have a picture taken for the flap of my memoir, Right for the Role, I was introduced to a photographer named Eusebio Hernandez. And he made me feel so comfortable and relaxed that we got a great shot. If you're looking for headshots, I strongly recommend that you contact Eusebio Hernandez, and his contact information is available on the show notes.
Well, if we're talking about delayed reactions, so I did Problem Child, and the next movie I did was Brain Donors, and the producers, the Zucker brothers, we didn't share some of the same artistic sensibilities, you may say, and so I brought in a tape of a guy who was on a TV show, and put it in the machine, and they said, no, he's TV. He's too TV. And I go, he's really funny. And they go, he's too TV. And I said, okay, fine. So we didn't hire Jim Carrey. He was in Living Color. And I brought in another guy. I suggested Griffin Dunn, but they wouldn't even see Griffin. I brought in another guy, an unknown comic, and I brought him in 4 times. And finally they said, don't bring him in. He's not getting the job. Don't bring him in anymore. And I go, okay, fine. So that movie comes out. We did it, whatever. 5 years later, I get a call and they say, hey, there's a movie shooting in 5 weeks. They're in prep. They don't have a director. Script's coming over. Go in tomorrow morning. I get the script. I look at it. It's very funny. I have a bunch of notes. I write my notes. Next morning, 9 o'clock, I go to Universal, knock on the door. The door opens, and Adam Sandler opens the door. And Adam Sandler is now Adam Sandler from Billy Madison and Saturday Night Live. He wasn't Adam Sandler 5 years before. He was some unknown guy just trying to get work. And he opens the door and he says, you. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. You. And I said, you. And he turned to everybody and he goes, this guy, you stood up for me. I said, I brought you in 4 times. I wanted to get you the part. And he said, well, you stood up for me. You have this job. And I was not in the door.
Yeah. And, again, Dennis, that's excuse me for interrupting you, but again, that's we plant seeds, and when they grow is completely not up to us.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I was going to add to that is I had my notes in my hand, and you know what I did with my notes? Yeah. Great, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
At that point, all I could do is talk myself out of the job that I just. So that we went on and did 10 movies together.
Yeah.
So
and almost $2 billion, and yet, because in the film world, awards don't separate drama and comedy. Comedy just really doesn't get the respect that it deserves. And comedy, I mean, your instinct as a kid that people will love you if you make them laugh, it's guiding principle. If we can make each other laugh instead of making each other, have road rage on the way to an audition, it's a special gift, and you have it in your personal life as well as your professional life as both an actor and a director. It's been an extraordinary career, Dennis, and I just am so congratulatory of what you've accomplished, and I love the way you have accomplished it, because you you're a community builder, and you're a guy who wants to surround himself with people who are great at their job and
Yeah.
fun to be with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That
I
is.
tried to do that too,
Yeah.
and you were so kind after you read Right for the Role. I really appreciated it.
That's wonderful. It's a wonderful book.
Well,
You know,
thanks.
talking about planting seeds, you know, the last movie I directed was right before the COVID, and it was called Love, Weddings, and Other Disasters. And I Jim Jeffries was going to play the part of this drunken game show host, and his right before we were shooting, his TV schedule changed, and we didn't have somebody. So I said, I'll just play it. You know, I had so much fun doing it that I called Bob Gersh and I go, let's go back to acting.
Yeah,
And so I'm not seeking employment as a director anymore. If something comes up, I would really have to want to do it. But
sure.
I'm now back full force being an actor. And unfortunately, unfortunately, most of the casting people now have not seen the Rockford Files, and so, but the agents are 100% behind me, and so I'm now auditioning again, and I'm the wonderful part about my life is that I had all this success as a director, so I'm not in the position where I say I got to get this job to pay the rent. I just want to I want to act. So I'm now free to be me
Yeah,
without any pressure, and I'm really enjoying the process. And I basically, you know, if I don't get the job, uh, I'm basically auditioning in my mind for the casting people.
sure.
So they go, "Oh, who's this guy?" Because I've outlived a lot of my competition now.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, I'm sort of at that same place. I was surprised when I was doing this research about you to discover that you might be 6 months older than I am. I always thought you were a kid and I was an old man. But I'm also at the place now where I only am casting things that interest me or for people I have loved for years.
Right.
And it's so freeing. I have no it's
Yeah.
sometimes people say, is there anything else that you want to accomplish now, and blah, 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 blah. And the answer really is, without arrogance, no. I'm fine. I
Right.
did what I
Right.
did, and I had a ball for 40 years. I know, and I know you did too. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if we look back at Dennis at 7 and Johnny at 7, we think, oh my God, they did that? How did that happen? And
Yeah.
that's really what we've been talking about,
Yeah.
is the journey to that is it's magic. It's not something you can plan. It's not something you just have to keep putting one foot in front. If you want to be a
Yeah.
duck, you got to quack, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So I'm here on the East Coast now while I'm doing Happy Gilmore, and I belong to this club in New York called the Players Club. Do you know that?
uh-huh.
Yeah. So last year they said that they're having a one act festival, and so you can submit because it's writers and actors and musicians, all those people at that club, and so submit a one act play, and if it's selected, you'll do it. So my Gersh agents in New York, very friendly, very nice. I like them a lot, and they like me as a person, but they hadn't really seen me act. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write a one act play. So I wrote a one act play, I submitted it, and it got selected. There were 5 selected out of like 40, whatever. So I wrote it specifically for me. And it's actually called The Audition, and it takes place in an audition room with a casting director and a director and me auditioning. And so it got selected. We rehearsed it, did it on the night, and I had not been on stage in New York in 50 years since the drug addicts burned down my theater.
Right.
So I was sitting. We were fourth up, and so I'm standing in the back of the theater and getting nerves. And so I say to myself, okay, you're nervous, but the play is called The Audition. So pretend that you're outside and you're going to go in an audition. And so I got that mindset, and I go, okay, that's good. I'm good there. And I go, great, I got it. I am in control. The third play ends, people are clapping, whatever, they change the chairs. I stepped from off stage to on stage. My mouth went from wet to Sahara Desert dry. And my thought in my mind was, that's interesting. And I went, and then did it. And it actually killed. And the agents were so happy they came. They were so happy to have seen me on stage. So to your listeners and viewers, don't wait. Create, make something, make your own projects. And it wasn't easy then when I started out directing, when I had to do film and cut film and write. You can do this on your phone now.
Right.
So I actually recruited my already agents, because I'd love to do a play, whatever. So they now have seen me live on stage, and they would never have done that if I hadn't decided to sit down and make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, Dennis, I so appreciate you joining us today, and that is a great place to end our conversation, because that is the best advice, and it's similar to advice that I've been giving as well. And just make it happen. Do it. I think we should make T-shirts that say, "Don't wait, create."
Yeah, I say, if you wait, you'll be a waiter.
Well, that's true. When I was a little kid, my mom used to say to me, "Johnny, describe yourself in 3 words." Dennis, describe yourself in 3 words.
I wish I was John Levey. Is that 3?
That's 5.
Hey, I'm going to give you one more story, and you can put it in or not.
Thank you.
And this is about auditioning.
By the way, I want to interrupt you just to say that if you ever put up the one-act play in Los Angeles, I want to play the casting director.
Oh, you'd be great. Yes, I may do it, because
tell the story.
I submitted it to a Palm Springs one-act festival, and I haven't. They haven't decided yet. But if I get in that, you can be that guy. Great. Okay, so this is the story, and if you want to cut something else out and interject this, because it strikes me funny. So 2 weeks ago, I get I have to audition, put myself on tape for a TV series. So Richard Klein from Three's Company, my buddy, lives in New Jersey. So I called him up and I said, "Hey, I'm coming over. I want you help me with this audition." He goes, "Okay." Go over, put my phone onto the tripod, and we read through it a couple of times, and then we did 25 takes. And on 20, we just did it because we can do better, whatever. We'll try this, whatever. So we did 25 takes, and take 25, we go, got it. I come back to my apartment here, transfer take 25 to the computer, press play. Richard and I had mixed up record with stop.
Nice.
So we had 25 takes of, that was pretty good. What should we try now? We no takes of the acting, because he would turn it off when I was acting and then turn it on when we were talking about what we should do in the next take. 25 takes of our notes. He called me up and he said, "How did it look?" And I go, "What are you doing tomorrow?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
All right,
it's a good idea to have a partner who knows what the hell they're doing.
That's why you got Trudy and Jerry.
Exactly. Well, again, thank you so much, Dennis. And
Thank you,
I look
buddy.
forward to tipping a glass with you sometime out here soon in LA when you're finished. I could talk to you for hours, but
Beautiful. All right, pal.
I so appreciate your
Thank you for
sharing yourself with
including
us.
me.
My pleasure.
All right. Goodbye.